Diehl, the former Giants lineman, part of our post-game Giants coverage here on MSG. He joins us now on the video call center from his home in Livingston, New Jersey. Dave, as always, we appreciate the time. In our last segment, we talked about pro athletes playing through injuries. We discussed load management. In your 11 years with the Giants, I have you missing only 12 games. How often did you have to play when you were not 100%?
I think the only time as an offensive lineman that you truly feel 100% is the day before training camp. We're talking about the game of football here. And, I started thinking about this when they started talking about Saquon. And it went back for me to when we started talking about college players sitting out of their bowl games if they're not playing for the national championship. And I'm like, well, this is a single incident. I don't think it's going to trickle into the NFL. But when you think about it, when you hear people talk about pitchers with a pitch count, they're only going to throw so many times a game, or with basketball players. And now with Saquon Barkley, you are a professional athlete paid to do your job. That's where it's different than the college game. So in regards to playing with injuries, as long as you're not doing something or playing with something that can seriously severe you and hurt you long-term, like a concussion or those other things, this is a game where you know you're going to be banged up, you know you're going to be injured, and you play through those things, not to the detriment of yourself if it's something that very serious or that critical, but when it's something like a sprained ankle or a sprained knee or a sprained shoulder, those are all things that you play through. Going back to Super Bowl 46 in 2011, thank you, Vince Wilfork. This finger is permanent thanks to you. But these are all things that, as an offensive lineman, that you deal with, especially when you're in a trench warfare. You're going O-line, D-line. I played the rest of the season from that November game all the way through the Super Bowl with the cast on. So, there are certain things that as a professional athlete, let alone a professional football player, you're playing a violent, physical game. There are going to be injuries. There are going to be things that don't feel physically right to you. But that these are things that you deal with as a player and that you play through.
That's big time, David. I felt the same way. Just moving on to the game this weekend. Giants lose to the Jets, lose the New York rivalry. How much does that bother you as a former Giant?
It definitely it hurts when you're sitting here talking about the crosstown rival and a pinnacle game for the New York Giants to really push through to the bye week in the second half of the season. So it is very difficult to see them lose a game to the Jets, especially after the Jets coming off of a game of a loss up against the Miami Dolphins. But you knew that this was going to be a tough game. This was going to be a grind-out game. And unfortunately for the Giants, when they got their opportunities, they didn't capitalize on them, just like going back to the Monday Night Football Dallas game.
With that in mind, these two teams play every 4 years, as you know. So here's my question for you. Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, in 4 years, do they match up again?
I believe that they do. Number one, when you think about Sam Darnold, obviously dealt with the mono early in the season, which physically it takes a while to get back from that. But also, the fact with Joe Douglas, their new hired GM, he is building that football team from the inside out, starting with that offensive line and defensive line, and then moving from there. You knew that there were going to be some issues with the Jets' offensive line, knowing that they only brought in Kelechi Osemele during the offseason, and it was still a big question mark at the two tackle positions on the edge. So that they're going to address that this upcoming free agency or draft. Same can be said for the New York Giants. You think about Daniel Jones in his first season. You can see the progress that he's making, but unfortunately, when you have the amount of turnovers, whether it be interceptions or fumbles, those are the things that mask all the good things that he's doing as a football player. I think he is a pedigree quarterback. I think that he will be the quarterback in 4 years. Now it's understanding and diagnosing what he needs to get better at, what are the things that are his strengths, and now building a football team around that.
Dave, switching gears a little bit from two young quarterbacks to one quarterback who's still young. We were debating earlier the MVP at this point in the season. Is it a two-dog race? Is it Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson, or could there be a dark horse in there as well, in your opinion?
I think if there is a dark horse, I think it could be Dalvin Cook out of the Minnesota Vikings, which is interesting considering he is the running back. But the fact that the Vikings are winning football games, they're beating good football teams, and they have that type of defense, that's one that you could have as the dark horse. For me, number 2, I would put Lamar Jackson. I mean, the game that he just had up against the Bengals, you would say that he had a day in that game. He completely took over and dominated that football game through the 3 quarters with a perfect passer rating, which he's done twice this season, which there was only one other quarterback to do that in NFL history, and that's Ben Roethlisberger. So he's putting himself in unbelievable company. But for me, right now, the MVP is definitely Russell Wilson. I know a lot of people always talk about Tom Brady being the quarterback to be able to win football games and have a dynamic offense with not having a piece around him. Russell Wilson's been doing that ever since they completely took apart the Legion of Boom and rebuilt that football team. Yet when the game is on the line and you have Russell Wilson as your quarterback, you know that you have the opportunity to win a football game, and it was proven in this last game. I know a lot of people want to look at those numbers and think, oh, well, Lamar Jackson versus the Bengals, those numbers put him ahead of Russell Wilson. But I think the way that Russell Wilson won that game, his 32nd game-winning drive in either the fourth quarter or in overtime, these are things that we've always seen out of him as the quarterback, and he's truly been the catalyst for that entire football team. So for me, with hands down, I think Russell Wilson is the MVP right now.
Hey, Dave, thanks so much. We appreciate the insight, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Sounds great. Have a great one, guys.
All right, former